It's time for your daily LSU baseball update with Musso at the box. Now, Matt Musso.
Off and running. Welcome in another edition of Musso at the Box, presented by Gotlit Light Installers. Fired up to have you along for the ride here today. Go ahead and smash that like button if you have not already. Please get subscribed on the YouTube channel and on your favorite podcast app. Just search Musso at the Box. You can follow me on social media, Twitter X, Musso Matthew, as well as Instagram and Facebook. You can find me there as well. Okay. Today's show. Obviously, LSU cancels the game against Grambling in the midweek on Tuesday. I have some thoughts on that, and it kind of ties deeper into our bigger conversation. So no recap, obviously. So I want to dovetail the conversation about canceling Grambling into an updated postseason outlook. We have some new regional projections, field of 64 projections from D1 baseball that are fascinating from an LSU and an SEC standpoint. So I kind of have thoughts on both that I'd love to get into here on today's show. So that's really what we're going to do. Like I said, I think the decision with the Grambling game factors in, so we'll just go ahead and start there. If you listened to yesterday's show, after we talked LSU's offense, we gave a brief, preview, quote unquote, preview of Grambling. And really, I just told you that I didn't think LSU should play it, and I didn't think the game would be played. And here we are, and it's not. Don't get me wrong. I want to watch LSU play as many baseball games as they can because I just love watching baseball. But when you really look at the situation, this is the move that makes the most sense. Take resume out of it, first and foremost. Grambling has to bus down from Grambling. That's a longer bus trip in the state than your normal midweek opponent would have. So you had to make the decision earlier in the day. It's finals week at LSU, so you can't just move the game up depending on players' schedules. I mean, they've scheduled out their finals on certain days where they know they can get them done and then be able to take care of all their baseball activities. So you have less flexibility in your student schedule as well. Also, with being finals week, you don't need to push the start time back and be playing, until 1 a.m. potentially, especially with Arkansas coming in. And I mean, on top of that, you just played a condensed schedule. I mean, this past weekend, it makes a whole lot of sense logistically. And then you factor in everything with LSU's resume, and this is an easy call. You see teams do this all the time now. This midweek game specifically, the last one or the first week in May, cancel it because of resume purposes. So it doesn't hurt your RPI. And for me, it's not necessarily LSU's RPI. LSU lost the midweek game to Northwestern State. Their RPI dropped 6 spots to right outside the top 10. Then they went and took 2 out of 3 from Tennessee, and you were right back in the top 10, and you've held steady there. So it's not necessarily your RPI. It's one fraction of your RPI that is strength of schedule that I think this is huge for. Because Grambling is not good. Grambling's opponents are not good, and Grambling's opponents are not good, and all of that factors into their strength of schedule, which then in turn factors into your strength of schedule. LSU's strength of schedule is just inside the top 30, which isn't bad. That's actually pretty good. But by not playing that game, you keep Grambling off of your schedule, so they will not factor into that. And when you play Arkansas and South Carolina to close out the season, you'll finish most likely with a top 25 strength of schedule, which is great. You want excellent and elite. That's where you get into top 10. You're not getting there. Not in the regular season, at least. But that part's huge. And why is it so huge? Well, because of the teams you're competing with when it comes to top 8 national seeds, specifically in your own conference. And that's, again, where we can handle this or kind of dovetail this more into the postseason outlook portion of the show. LSU, you compare resumes, with a Vanderbilt or even a Georgia. Georgia and LSU are both 15-9 in the league. Both of them have a great chance to end up a top 8 national seed. Georgia's strength of schedule is 6th. Yours is 29th. Right? Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt's competing for national seed. They're at 14 conference wins right now. You could be competing with them. Their strength of schedule is 3rd. Yours is 29th, right? Like, you get where I'm going with that. You could throw Auburn there. Auburn has the number 2 strength of schedule. Auburn's at 13 conference wins. But they're hotter than anybody right now. Their strength of schedule 2nd. Yours is 29th. You would have played Grambling. You would have beaten them. You would have been able to name your score. Hell, LSU put 27 runs on that team that ended up in the NCAA tournament a year ago because they won the SWAC tournament. Like, you could have went out there and just named your score. Nothing in that game was really going to translate over to what you're going to see from Arkansas's pitching. So, fine. That's where I look at this and I go, okay, you had a built-in excuse to cancel this game, so absolutely do it. And they did, and it will benefit their resume in the long run, particularly strength of schedule. Now, let's talk about why you would have liked to have seen them play the game. Because, I mean, you want to get guys back on the mound, that's fine. I mean, I'm always going to get behind that. But, again, I even think that plays into this as well because you played a condensed schedule over the weekend in College Station, and the majority of the guys that you lean on in midweek games had to pitch on Sunday. Connor Ware, Jaden Newt, DJ Primo, Cooper Williams, all those guys. William Schmidt would have gotten the ball and could have really extended, which I would have loved to have seen. But even with the condensed schedule, I think giving your guys as much rest as possible going into the game against Arkansas, into the series against Arkansas, is huge. Because that's a massive, massive series. Is it must win? No, it's not must win because here's the deal. LSU is into the NCAA postseason. Like, they're not missing the tournament. LSU, barring complete catastrophe where you go 0-6 down the stretch, you're going to host a regional. Like, LSU is going to be a top 16. So, no, it's not must win. If you want to be a top 8, which you do, that's one of your goals, it's very important to win it. So, getting your guys as much rest coming off a condensed weekend, I think that's great too. Would you have loved to have seen guys get out back on their mound? Sure. I would have loved to have seen guys get back out there on the mound. But would you have loved to have seen guys, try to get bats going? Sure. But again, nothing you do offensively against Grambling is going to carry over to what you're going to see from Arkansas on the mound. So all in all, I think this is a very predictable decision. I think it is the right decision for resume and for where you currently are at in the season. And it just so happened you benefited because you had a legitimate excuse. If it was not storming and hailing in Baton Rouge Tuesday night, LSU would have played this game against Grambling. They would have beat them. Their RPI would have dropped. And then depending on what happened this weekend, it would have gone right back up. But again, for me, it's the strength of schedule aspect that I think is so massive in this instance with LSU and Grambling. So, let's get more into the postseason outlook now. Let me remind you about Gotlit Light Installers and GotlitLights.com first. Permanent outdoor landscape lighting. Remember, it's not just the Christmas lights anymore in the winter, although they have that, and you should still absolutely do that. They're fantastic there too, but they've expanded. They want to be your one-stop shop for anything exterior lighting on your home, and Gotlit Light is that. Permanent outdoor landscape lighting, front yard or backyard. They have you covered, whether it's your pool area or your flower beds. Gotlit Lights has you covered there. They'll maintain, they'll install anything you need. You call Gotlits with those lights from installation on down. Graduation season, it's here. You're hosting a grad party for the grad in your family. You need some outdoor lighting temporary for that engagement. Gotlit Light Installers, that's who you call. Custom design, cut to fit, never a loose light. When Gotlit is involved, they'll install, they'll maintain, they'll tear it down. If you want it stored, they'll store it for you as well. Gotlit Light Installers, GotlitLights.com. Tell them you heard it right here on Musso at the Box. All right. Postseason outlook. This headset wire is driving me nuts today. Okay. Postseason outlook. So D1 baseball, it's that time of the week. They have released their latest field of 64 projections. I really love favoring theirs a lot because, Kendall Rogers, Aaron Fitt, Mark Etheridge, their whole team that puts these together, they have a lot of experience in doing this and how the committee works and being able to talk to people on the committee and things of that nature. I find theirs to be really the kind of the most accurate, if you would. It's still a projection. Things can obviously change, but there were a few things that really caught my eye. Let's start just from an LSU perspective before I get into my thoughts on how they have the SEC. In this latest projection, they dropped it May 6th. LSU is the number 4 overall national seed, firmly planted still as a top 8. So y'all, I can sit here and tell you after the A&M series when everyone's down and the sky is falling that in actuality it's not, and LSU's still in a really good spot and all that. It's another thing to hear a national publication or see a national publication see it and say it as forcefully as they did, with LSU still being the 4th overall seed. Like, you are firmly in. If you're interested in LSU's regional projection, Miami's the 2, Southeastern's the 3, Central Connecticut is the 4, and LSU would be paired with Eugene, Oregon as the 13, with TCU as their 2, Cal Poly as their 3, and Fairfield as their 4. That is obviously less consequential because that changes just about every time. What you're looking for is seeding. And LSU being the 4 is awesome. And y'all, it's the same conversation that we've had. We started this convo after the Alabama series, heading into Tennessee, because we highlighted this 3-week stretch where you hosted Tennessee, went to College Station, hosted Arkansas. And that, man, you are really going to know either you were on the right track to get in that top 8, or you were going to know exactly what you needed to do in the final weekend. And so far, that has played out. I told you LSU, before the Tennessee series, I sat here and told you LSU needed to go 5-4 over their last, 12 SEC games at that point. 5-4. And that's not sexy. That's not what anybody wants, but that would have got you to 19-11. And each of the last 4 years, there's been an SEC team get a top 8 at 19-11. In some instances, there's been 2 SEC teams get top 8s at 19-11. So it even gives you a little bit of wiggle room. You're right there. In laying that out, it was 2 out of 3 at home against Tennessee, 1 out of 3 against A&M, 2 out of 3 against Arkansas, 2 out of 3 against South Carolina. So next up is the 2 out of 3 against Arkansas. And if you do that, I mean, you lock yourself into a lock for a top 10 RPI. That will put you at 17 conference wins. And you go to South Carolina, who's not good. They just aren't. They have 5 wins in the league. That's a very winnable series. You'll be an overwhelming favorite to take 2 out of 3, and you could have the possibility of a sweep that would get you to 20. If you go 5-1 down this stretch, you are a lock for a top 8. 19-11, there's some teams that could chase you down potentially. And that's where, again, we get back to the conversation of your strength of schedule, comparing yourself to Vanderbilt, Auburn, Georgia, those kind of teams. Because I think Texas is a lock. Arkansas at 17-7 is as close to a lock as you can be. But they have a trip to Baton Rouge, and then they host Tennessee to close out the regular season. So they're also embroiled in a hell of a stretch. I think even with the competition that you have for the national seed within your own league, you're in a really good spot, given your remaining schedule. Take Vanderbilt as your example. So LSU, and for what it's worth, Vanderbilt is the number 8 national seed in this projection. So they're right there on the cusp, but they're in as of now. Take Vanderbilt as your example. This weekend, Vanderbilt has to go to Tennessee. The Vols are having problems, but they're also a desperate team playing on their home field. That's not going to be a cakewalk for Vanderbilt. Then they go to Kentucky, who we're going to talk about here momentarily, who's fighting for they host Kentucky. So they're at Tennessee, they host Kentucky. Kentucky's fighting for their NCAA tournament lives. If Vanderbilt loses 2 out of 3 to Tennessee, they cannot get to 19 wins in the league. The best they can do is 18. That would hurt their case. Now, their metrics are really strong, so it wouldn't completely end their case. But things can play out there. You look at Auburn. Auburn is as hot can be right now. Coming off that series win against Tennessee, they'll face South Carolina. They'll do very well in that series, especially at home, but they have to go to Ole Miss at 13 wins. Can they get to 19? They would have to go, they'd need to sweep South Carolina, which would get them to 16, and they would need to sweep Ole Miss on the road, and that would get them to 19. But again, if they get to 18, their metrics are strong. But LSU being at 15, only needing 3 more to get to 19 is massive. And when you compare, you have Arkansas that's going to be tough, but that's at home. That's an advantage. And then you go to South Carolina, who, again, has 5 wins in the league. It sets up for you. Control what you can control. Because the only people that are going to chase LSU down if they win the games they need to win, the only people that, let me rephrase that, the only teams that have a chance to chase LSU down if they take care of business and win the games they need to win are the SEC teams. There is not an ACC team or anybody that is going to chase LSU down unless they crater and lose both of these series and end up 17-13 in the league. So you're looking at your opponents in the SEC right now, basically. Your foes that could potentially hamper you. But if you take care of business, your metrics are going to be strong enough with 19 or even 20 conference wins that you're going to be in there. Now, you have to go out there and win, and we'll talk plenty much more about that throughout as the week goes along. I have some things already planned for tomorrow's show on the LSU Arkansas series already. It's that big. We'll spend 2 days talking about it. But I hope I explain that as clearly as I can. Like, you're still in a really good spot, and their projections show that firmly in, not just in, firmly in as the number 4 overall national seed according to D1 Baseball. Now, I kind of just tip my hand a little bit at this next part of the conversation, and it shifts more to the SEC. In this field of 64, D1 Baseball has 6 top 8s from the SEC. 6 out of 8. Texas at 1, Arkansas at 2, LSU at 4, Georgia at 5, Auburn 6, and Vanderbilt at 8. Your other 2 are Florida State and North Carolina. That's wild to me. And I wonder if it's part because of the expanded SEC now with 16 teams. But man, if you just look at the RPI and the metrics for those teams, Georgia's metrics are great. Vandy's are great. Auburn's are great. And RPI is heavily leaned on. But we're going to figure out how heavily. Because not all of those teams are going to get to 19 wins in the SEC. It's just not mathematically possible. Like we just told you, Auburn to get there has to sweep their last 2 series. I guess I shouldn't say it's not mathematically possible. It is mathematically possible. But how likely is it that that happens? Right? So we've long talked about 19, 20 wins. But when we first had this conversation, I threw out Georgia a year ago. Georgia got a top 8 at 17-13, and the SEC had 5. Because even at 17-13, their metrics were great. Great strength of schedule. RPI was super high. Like all of those things. That could happen again with some of these teams. With an Auburn. With a Vanderbilt. Can the SEC get 6? Man, that feels hard to believe. But when you look at the metrics, yeah, they can. Like that is something that can happen. I don't think that it will. I think the SEC is going to get 4, at least 4. I don't know if you get 6, but you certainly can. And the precedent was set a year ago with Georgia getting in at 17-13 because they had great metrics and their RPI was fantastic. So that's just one other thing to file away. The other also deals with the SEC, and that's the 14 bids. 14 bids. D1 baseball is projecting right now for the SEC. They set a record a year ago with a 14-team league. 14 would be another record. And that's been a conversation we've had so much. How does the committee view the SEC now? We didn't just have this conversation with baseball. We had it in the college football playoff as well. How does the committee view the SEC now expanded? Because you've done nothing but strengthen the league. Texas has looked like the best team in the country for a good portion of the season. They were ranked the best team in the country for a good portion. The SEC has had Texas, LSU, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Arkansas. 5 teams all ranked number 1 at one point this year. Like, the strength of the league is insane. It's insane. And really, if you want to tie in the Baseball America poll, Georgia's the number 1 ranked team in the poll right now for Baseball America. So that gives you 6 SEC teams, 6 different teams that have been ranked number 1 at one point. But what I really want to see is, again, we've long focused in on certain benchmark wins. 14 conference wins in the SEC get you in. 13, you feel good, but you're still sweating on Selection Monday, right? But 14, you've always felt great. 12, you have a chance, but you're not expecting it. That's really what I want to see this year. Can an SEC team get in there with 12? And the team that is most likely to test that is Kentucky. So Kentucky is one of the last 4 teams in this D1 baseball projection. In fact, they are team 61. In this projection. Or I'm sorry. They are team 62. Pardon me. They're team 62 in this projection. Kentucky, as it stands right now, is 10-14 in the league. And when you look at what Kentucky has remaining, they host Oklahoma this weekend, and then they go to Vanderbilt. Kentucky's going to be fighting for their NCAA tournament lives, I should say, in those final 6 games. But it's very likely they go 2-4. That's 2 really tough weekends. Now, Kentucky has also only lost 1 series this year, and it was when they got swept a week ago by State. So they're going to be able to compete. But if they go 2-4, their RPI is still going to be fine. I mean, those are both quad 1 series, no matter if you're playing them at home or on the road. And their RPI would still be really good. Kentucky's RPI right now is 41st. It wouldn't deviate much from that. But at 12 wins, could they still get in? And that's what I want to see. I want to see that because that's going to set a precedent going forward. Like, that's how we learn. And that's what's going to reshape this conversation with an expanded SEC and the committee. So I think what Kentucky does down the stretch is fascinating. The other team that's in that boat is A&M and Mississippi State. But Texas A&M plays Missouri this weekend, so you can chalk that up as a sweep because everybody has swept Missouri. They're 0-24, and that's going to get Texas A&M to 13, and they're out of that conversation. And at that point, they're in. If A&M gets to 13, they are in, given their metrics and the series. You realize A&M has series wins over Arkansas, Tennessee, and now LSU. Like, that's a hell of a resume that they have built. And once they get to 13, with that, I think they're in. Mississippi State would be the other one to watch. State is at 10 wins as well, but State's playing really, really well. You are at home this weekend against Ole Miss, and that's your rival. And with as well as you're playing, man, you should feel pretty good about taking 2 of 3. If you do that, that gets you to 12, and then they get to close the series with Missouri. So Mississippi State could actually end up with like 14 or 15 wins, which has them firmly in the field. Kentucky's that team to watch, y'all. Like, I think looking at schedules, and again, we'll see how Mississippi State does against Ole Miss this weekend at home, but again, it's at home and it's your rival. I think the SEC looks great for 13. It's can they get that 14th, and it's Kentucky, and can Kentucky potentially get in with 12 wins? That's what I'm looking at to set precedent going forward. That will answer the question how the committee views an expanded SEC. So I think that's actually fascinating. And y'all, I mean, 14 bids. That's incredible because the ACC is next in this with 9. And the ACC is strong again this year. But 14 from the SEC. And you might say, well, how do you get there? Well, it's the RPI. And, you know, your resume and your RPI, and this is why RPI is such a flawed metric, and it is. Like it really, really is. Because the core principle of the RPI is wins. Sure, who you beat, where you beat them, all that thing, that factors in, but the core principle of it is wins. The SEC got off to a great start in the RPI this year because they were so dominant in the non-conference. I mean, Georgia went 24-2. Texas went 19-3. Vandy went 20-4. Auburn went 20-4. Arkansas went 23-2. LSU went 23-2. Alabama 17-7. Excuse me, Alabama was 23-1. That was Coastal that I looked at. Alabama 23-1. Tennessee 23-1. Florida 22-3. Ole Miss 20-4. Oklahoma was 19-3 in the non-conference. Like you get the picture. A&M, they struggled at 17-6, but Mississippi State had 19 wins in the non-conference. Kentucky had 15 wins in the non-conference. That's the 14 that are projected in. And I mean, y'all, even South Carolina. I mean, South Carolina's RPI is right outside the top 50. They got off to a fantastic start under Coach Maneri in the non-conference. Like they went 21-4. So that's how. Like that's a large that you're going to have a great RPI when you win that many games, even in out of conference, because the core principle of the RPI is wins. That's why you can see, teams like here. Let me get an example for you. Teams like Coastal Carolina, who has only 3 quad 1 wins and a strength of schedule at 59, but they've won 37 games on the year. Their RPI is 12th. So, like, that's how you see this from the SEC and how they've built up that RPI resume that they have as a league because they were so successful in the non-conference. So, hat tip to them. And it's going to potentially lead to 14 bids. But again, that's also why the RPI is a flawed metric, but they lean on it so heavily. And it favors the SEC because they have the most talent. They have the best coaches, the best facilities, and in turn, the best teams. And when you have the best teams and you're heavily leaning on a metric that factors in wins as its primary target, you're going to have a lot of success. So we'll see if they get 14. Look, we're 3 weeks out from Selection Monday, and that's going to be something I'm very intrigued. Very intrigued to watch ancillary to LSU and obviously where they end up. So I just thought I'd kind of dive into a little bit of that today because I found it interesting. All right, y'all, that's going to wrap it up. Smash the like button, please, if you have not already. Get subscribed, YouTube, and on your favorite podcast app. Just take the show with you wherever you go. Follow me on social media. That's greatly appreciated. Got Lit Light Installers, gotlitlights.com, and be here next time for more on Musso at the Box.